the ring system. In the past week, there's been a flurry of activity in the DID community about a presentation publicly posted by McLean Hospital on their YouTube channel. It is the most recent in a series of cases that are of great concern to our community. Today, we're going to talk about what happened. In short, professionals in the field of dissociation have used content produced by people with DID without their consent as case examples of people who are feigning or imitating DID for personal gain. Secondly, they've implied that participating in online communities, being open about one's diagnosis, and participating in activism are activities that are anti-therapeutic and/or indicative of feigning DID. This is a heavy subject for a lot of folks, so I want to remind you all to take care of yourselves, take breaks, and reach out to your community for support as you need. As an introduction, I want to talk about an article published in New York Magazine in August of 2021. It's titled, "Meet My Multiple Me's. People with dissociative identity disorder have started presenting themselves on YouTube to rapturous fans." This is an article both us and our friends, the Alexandrite System, were interviewed at length for, but only one quote and a short summarizing sentence was included from our video, while the Alexandrites were cut out completely. If you're interested in a much longer analysis of the article, the Alexandrites have posted a deep dive on the subject, which is linked in this video's description. However, I want to focus on the comments from one researcher that were included in this article, Richard Lowenstein. Alongside comments about how everything we do is unification, he stated that no DID person publicly talks about their switching. Instead, he says, they hide it. They don't want it recognized. He also commented that online activism is inevitably sensationalistic and anti-therapeutic. This is in direct contrast to other professionals that were interviewed for the piece, who noted the positives of being understood by a broader internet community. Bethany Brand, for example, talked about how people with DID can move past shame to acceptance and be open about their experiences without feeling embarrassment. The opinion expressed by Lowenstein is not unique. It's something that we've heard and read in various corners of research on dissociation, dating back to the 1980s and still appearing in recent publications. It's the idea that people with DID are inherently silent and shameful about their plurality and their symptoms, and anything to the contrary is either anti-therapeutic or indicative of malingering. In the past few months, two presentations have sparked concern with us, the larger plural community, and the DID clinical community, by using DID content without permission. The first was a panel of presentations by 6 different researchers hosted at the ISSTD annual conference, one of which was by Matthew Robinson. We spoke with someone who attended this conference. Robinson recently gave a second solo presentation at McLean. A full recording was published on McLean's website and their YouTube channel. I believe that at the heart of these presentations is the idea that I mentioned before, that shame and silence are vital determining characteristics of what constitutes genuine DID. For the rest of the video, I will focus primarily on the presentation by Robinson given at McLean, as the recording was made public on their YouTube channel and has had a demonstrably larger impact. According to Robinson, he gave the same presentation at McLean as he did at the ISSTD 4 months before McLean's video was posted. And now, let's get into what happened. The presentation at McLean was structured around content created by people with DID. Despite Robinson's opening and closing comments claiming that he could not confirm or deny their diagnosis, he describes the people in the videos as having imitative DID. These videos functionally serve as case examples for a clinical population, as he uses the content creator's actions as examples of the symptoms exhibited by someone with imitative DID. Robinson used the content of 7 systems at McLean for examples of imitative DID. These systems were not contacted to gain consent for the use of their content. Robinson did not medically examine the people featured, stating himself, "I don't know anything about them except for what they put online." There was no stated process to rule out if these folks had an actual diagnosis. Multiple folks used as examples were professionally diagnosed with DID. This information was publicly accessible and easy to find. There was no stated criteria Robinson used for identifying case examples. And finally, no confidentiality was provided. System names, alter names, faces, voices, and social media handles were prominently displayed in the videos used in the presentation. I could easily find and contact every single system whose content was used in the presentation. A few people who were affected have come forward and responded to how their content was used in Robinson's presentation at McLean. Their videos are linked in the description of this video, and I highly recommend watching them to gain critical context on this issue. Seriously, pause this video and go watch them. Pixie's video in particular has clear proof about how her content was taken out of context and misrepresented by Robinson, leaving her open to targeted harassment, and how supplemental videos of her refuting Robinson's interpretation were easily available and publicly accessible if he had taken the time to look further into what she'd previously published. While the McLean video was public, the ISSTD conference was not. To continue to respect their confidentiality, we won't name those who created content used by the ISSTD, except for one system. The Bluebell System was used as an example of imitative DID. For those who don't know, the Bluebell System was an activist on TikTok who publicly talked about their experience with DID. They were a kind, loved member of our community. In 2021, they ended their own life while inpatient at a psych ward. First and foremost, this is a clear violation of multiple ethical principles required of scientific researchers by the APA. Firstly, Section 9.01, titled Basis for Assessments in the APA's Code of Ethics, reads, "Psychologists provide opinions of the psychological characteristics of individuals only after they have conducted an examination of the individuals adequate to support their statements or conclusions. When, despite reasonable efforts, such an examination is not practical, psychologists document the efforts they made and the result of those efforts, clarify the probable impact of their limited information on the reliability and validity of their opinions, and appropriately limit the nature and extent of their conclusions or recommendations." In both presentations, people presented as case examples of imitative DID were not examined by Robinson or his colleagues. There was no stated evidence that Robinson made any effort to contact the system's effective. There was no acknowledgement that many of those used as case examples have publicly communicated their professional diagnoses. There was no discussion of how this lack of contact might have impacted the conclusions. And regardless, Robinson still described the systems featured as examples of imitative DID. This dramatic conclusion, without direct examination, documented efforts to make contact, and a discussion of the resulting impact, is astoundingly unethical. Hypothetically, if all the systems mentioned are actual cases of imitative DID, privacy, confidentiality, and informed consent is still an issue. In Section 8.03 on informed consent for recording images in research, psychologists must obtain informed consent before using recordings in their research unless, quote, "the research consists solely of naturalistic observations in public places, and it is not anticipated that the recording will be used in a manner that could cause personal identification or harm." While it can be argued that public videos on TikTok can be considered a naturalistic observation in a public place, the recordings clearly identified the subjects and exposed them to a new audience who otherwise may not have naturally found them. This is especially an issue if clinicians who viewed the presentation encounter the systems used as case examples in their clinical practice as a client. It could also make the systems used a target for harmful attention and harassment. I think videos used in research presentations should be, at the very least, de-identified or represented as a description and a video transcript. In my understanding of APA code, Robinson should have been required to obtain informed consent before using the videos. Robinson failing to obtain informed consent when required violates the 5th general ethical principle in the Code of Ethics, respect for people's rights and dignity. It reads, "Psychologists respect the dignity and worth of all people and the rights of individuals to privacy, confidentiality, and self-determination. The systems featured did not have their right to privacy, confidentiality, or self-determination respected. They did not consent to having their videos used, and they were not given a choice in the matter before the presentation was given to the audience." Unsurprisingly, at least one system featured did experience considerable harassment after McLean publicly uploaded the presentation to YouTube. Section 3.04 on avoiding harm requires that psychologists take reasonable steps to avoid harming their research participants and to minimize harm where it is foreseeable and unavoidable. The harassment systems received after their faces and names were used publicly was easily foreseeable, considering that Robinson acknowledged that many had a significant online platform. Robinson did not disclose any steps he might have taken to minimize this harm. Along with all of the ethical implications, the second thing that really did not sit right with us upon watching the presentation was the heavy emphasis on shame, confusion, and embarrassment as defining features of genuine DID. And the thing is, Robinson does have a point. It is not wrong to say that many people with DID have felt deep shame and embarrassment about their experiences and their diagnosis. Surviving trauma, especially childhood trauma, can come with a deep-seated shame that's hard to shake. and early trauma is associated with and theorized to cause DID. Similarly, it's true that most people with DID have been confused or afraid of their own symptoms and desperately wished that they didn't have DID. However, Robinson heavily implied throughout the presentation that the absence of these feelings, shame, confusion, and concealment, were indicative of someone imitating DID, with no acknowledgement that people with DID can heal from internal conflict and move past feelings of shame. Robinson's description of genuine DID was often based on patients seen at the partial hospital program and outpatient center under his direction. He framed these descriptions in comparison with the videos of systems shown as examples of imitative DID to undermine the validity of online DID content creators. Here are some direct quotes from him on the subject. "The people I work with are reluctant, conflicted, confused, ashamed of what they experience and report. They can't imagine anyone would promote their symptoms openly. We know from years of clinical and research work that nearly all patients with DID are reluctant to discuss their symptoms and tend to feel ashamed and conceal what is happening." About switching, Robinson said that people with DID don't want people to notice that something has shifted or changed for them. They report feeling confused by the changes. When discussing people with DID who disclose their diagnosis to others, he said, "DID is really a disorder of hiddenness. That's true into adulthood, which is why it's surprising to see people online coming out about having DID." This last quote was a description of a video shown without permission. And I share this example to show, again, the very uncharacteristic way that people with imitated DID have awareness of their parts or self-states and little conflict or distress about the process of having parts and switching. All of these quotes in his presentation heavily imply that people who gain a deeper understanding of their own internal mental processes, learn to manage their symptoms instead of fear them, and/or speak openly about their symptoms without shame, could not possibly have the same disorder as people who were inpatient in his hospital. There was absolutely no discussion about how the process of healing for people with DID often spans many years, resulting in a wide spectrum of functionality. Yes, some folks with DID are in a near constant crisis state. Some folks with DID are endlessly confused or deeply shameful about what they're experiencing. But at the same time, there are those who, by putting in years of work, with or without professional help, are in a different place of their journey. There are people who exhibit deep understandings of themselves, their symptoms, and their multiplicity. There are people who can function relatively healthily on a daily basis with DID. There are people who are able to overcome their shame and share their experiences with others. Their existence is not acknowledged by Robinson. Shame comes from many different places. It's linked to trauma history, it can be internalized from societal stigma, and it can come from feeling alone, misunderstood, or judged by the people around you. Coming together as a community and listening to each other's stories, whether in person or online, is a powerful way to combat people who feel alone or misunderstood in their experience. Not only that, but speaking openly about our experience with DID, proudly, loudly, and without censorship in public is a powerful form of social change. And people talking about DID online are making serious changes in how we are perceived by society. This presentation itself is proof of that. Implying that shame is an integral part of genuine DID, and that speaking openly about one's experience with DID indicates that someone is imitating rather than being truthful, leaves us with medical professionals as the only people who can challenge societal stigma around mental illness, trauma, and survivorship. It strips our community of the authority to speak about our own experiences, connect with one another, and advocate for social change. To Robinson, an absence of feeling shame, confusion, and a need for concealment indicates imitative DID. At some point, he says that people with DID, they don't choose this, they don't wish for this, and the symptoms they experience develop out of a need for survival. It is true that disorders aren't chosen, but he has missed something important. Overcoming shame and expanding our capacity to heal is not imitation. It is essential to our survival. The proof of a fake cannot be someone's need for community. Beyond the role of shame and silence, there are so many more concerning aspects of this presentation that I think needs to be addressed. I just don't have a lot of time in this video, so I'm going to run through them really quick. Number one, This presentation plays into the double-edged expectations put on disabled people to talk about their disability both on and offline. If you talk too much about your symptoms, you're faking for attention. But if you don't show them off, people claim you're faking the disorder. Number 2, conversations criticizing self-diagnosis must include a discussion about how self-diagnosis is critically important for marginalized communities who are unable to access care. Number 3, while the potential of an accurate self-diagnosis is recognized, there's no conversation about what it might look like for someone to enter professional care with an accurate self-diagnosis, considering that they've had time to figure things out and gain a deeper understanding of their system. Number 4, there's an emphasis on inter-identity amnesia without any conversation about people who have OSDD, who may have no inter-identity amnesia at all and reduced identity confusion. Some estimates have stated that there are more people with OSDD than those who strictly fit the DID criteria. Number 5, this is the exact opposite of how we should discuss those in the community who may be confused about their diagnosis or who have been misdiagnosed, especially when posted publicly for non-clinicians to see. That is a process rooted in real and impactful experiences that occurs between an individual and a professional who's directly caring for them. Number 6, when asked about what healthy empowerment might look like for people with DID online, Robinson responded by saying that there are established and legitimate patient advisory programs under the supervision of a clinician. Number 7, the idea that online DID communities delegitimizes DID rather than exposing a broad audience to our complexity and our humanity. Number 8, the idea that online advocacy is furthering the legacy of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. It was an organization that attacked people with multiple personality disorder who ran the first community newsletters, email listservs, and support groups for people with MPD, which are analogous to much of our online community today. It's appalling to insinuate that we're continuing the legacy of a group that sought to erase our community elders. Number 9, Robinson's misuse of the words multiplicity, plurality, and the concept of non-pathological multiplicity. Both the terms multiplicity and the concept of non-pathological forms of multiplicity have been in the scientific literature since the 80s and were introduced by clinicians. While plurality was coined to oppose medical classifications, it was coined in the 90s and has been described in academic literature for the past 5 years. These are critical terms and concepts when discussing the DID community, and it shows a vast oversight in his background research for the presentation. Number 10, the framing of system members as displaced thoughts and feelings with a lack of identity, autonomy, or conscious differentiation. On the spectrum of opinions concerning how to define alters, this is a rather uncompromising position that does not reflect the patient's phenomenological experience. Number 11, Robinson's description of DID is very strict. Black and brown folks are underrepresented in the scientific research and association, and the absence of their experiences in medical literature means that how we conceptualize DID today is inherently limited. We need to be looking to expand our understanding of DID, not continue to constrict it. And number 12, this is not how clinicians looking after a patient population should be treating people who may be in that patient population. Anyways, here's where we stand as of today when I'm filming April 1st, 2023. McLean has removed the presentation video from their YouTube page. We haven't heard from them about why it was taken down. YouTube could have removed the video due to copyright claims. The video is still accessible on their website under CME, Continuing Education, Opportunity-Related Content. An Infinite Mind, an international nonprofit organization that provides direct education, advocacy, and support services to people living with dissociative disorders, has denounced Robinson's presentation at McLean. A link to their letter can be found in the video description. We have heard from a clinician that Bethany Brand and Richard Clough have defended the video on their dissociative email listserv and did not address any of our community's concerns. This is relatively unconfirmed, so it would be great to hear from them or from the ISSTD as a whole publicly. If there are any updates from this time forward, I will put them in the video description. And now for what you can do. The Plural Association started a petition to address the content presented at the ISSTD conference and McLean Hospital website, demanding that the organizations take accountability for the harm perpetuated to those directly and indirectly affected by the presentation. I want to take a quick moment to read a section of the petition. To ensure a genuine commitment to accountability and reparations, we call on the ISSTD and McLean Hospital to take the following steps. Number 1, ensuring that the videos and any related content are no longer available on their website, forums, educational materials, for sale, or through any other distribution channels affiliated with their organization. Number 2, publicly acknowledge the harm caused to the plural community by the ISSTD conference and the McLean Hospital video. Number 3, issue a formal apology to the plural community, especially to those whose content was used without consent, and make a commitment to avoid such harmful actions in the future. Number 4, organize and fund educational workshops or seminars with input and participation from the plural community to raise awareness about DID, plurality, and the importance of ethical and inclusive practices in mental health care. Number 5, reevaluate their educational materials, presentations, and workshops to ensure that they promote accurate, respectful, and empathetic understandings of DID and plurality, and remove any content that perpetuates stigma, misinformation, and discrimination. Number 6, encourage collaboration with and active involvement of the plural community in the development of future educational materials, research, and presentations, adhering to the principle of nothing about us without us. Number 7, establish and enforce clear guidelines for obtaining consent and protecting the rights of content creators when using their materials in presentations or other educational settings. The removal of the video from McLean Hospital's public platform makes a step in the right direction, but it is not enough. It is crucial that the ISSTD and McLean Hospital take comprehensive action to ensure that the harm caused is properly addressed and that future actions promote respect, understanding, and support for the plural community. The link to the petition is in the video description if you would like to sign it. And then finally, as a closing, I want to talk about these organizations as a whole. They are large organizations. There are many moving parts, independent programs, and rotating staff. They can go through a lot of change over time. As such, I'd like to frame this video not as a call out, but a call in. These organizations need to do better. They need to listen to our community. They need to work with us. And they can. I'd love to see clinicians working with systems who have an online platform to destigmatize DID and advocate for our community. As well-connected people within the community, online activists could coordinate with them to disseminate accurate information, give community feedback on potential research, and direct people to appropriate care. The only thing is, to work with us, these clinicians would have to listen to our community wisdom, use language that reflects our experiences, and believe us when we're quiet and when we're proud, when we fit the textbook description and when we don't. They need to not only acknowledge, but to celebrate when we move past our shame to find strength and comfort in our plurality. At the end of the day, our communities, the clinical and research community, and the plural community aren't separate. There are numerous plural clinicians and researchers, some of whom are undoubtedly part of the ISSTD and McLean Hospital. Fear of discrimination keeps many of them closeted, but hopefully, soon, none of us will have to worry about such things. Thank you so much for listening, and always remember, we're stronger together, nothing about us without us, and continue to be proud of your plurality. Shame should have no place in our lives.